Chapter 9. It wasn't until long after nightfall that quiet settled on the railway car. Frances had told all the stories and poems she could remember from her classroom readers to the 30 sleepy children. She helped make them comfortable on the hard coach seats, and after the lantern had been extinguished and the railway car was lit only by the light of a full moon, she wandered among them, singing some of the soft Irish songs Maud always sung to ease her children into sleep. When most of the children had fallen asleep, some of them pillowing their heads on their seatmates' laps and shoulders, there was no more lonely sniffles to be heard. Frances removed her hat and relaxed on the front seat. She retrieved her carpet bag from under the seat and pulled out a pencil and the journal Johnny had given her. And she had enough moonlight so she could write. She desperately wanted to put her thoughts about the children on paper to keep. She stroked the blank page of the journal before she found herself writing about Johnny and how much she missed him. Had she been wrong to leave without talking it over with him? Had she hurt him too much to ever make things right between them? Frances sighed. She wondered if her questions even mattered. Johnny had turned away from her. He turned inward, obsessed with anger at those who'd injured him. Johnny couldn't come to her with an open heart because his heart was filled with bitterness. She wrote, "When I return to Kansas, will I see Johnny ever again? What will my life be without him? Perhaps I should move to St. Joseph and live near Ma. Maybe that would be better, too." She jumped as Reverend Diller slid into a seat next to her. Flustered, Frances closed her journal with a snap. "First off, I want to apologize for grabbing your arm like that," Reverend Diller said. "Sometimes I have bad dreams. When you touched me, I thought, well, there was someone in my dream and I was fighting back. I didn't mean to hurt you." "It's all right," Frances said. "It was my fault. I didn't mean to startle you." Reverend Diller glanced at the blue book Frances's lap. "What are you writing?" he asked. "I keep a journal," Frances said. "I was about to write about some of the children." "They're a handful. They've given you a hard day," he said. Frances smiled. "No, they haven't," she said. "They're all good children." He slowly shook his head and smiled back. "One gives you a fright by running off through the train. Others squabble and fight. Babies cry. They demand your attention the entire time. You call that good?" "They're children, Reverend Diller. Why be surprised when they behave like children? If they all sat quietly, I'd be quite worried about them." "I'd like you to call me Seth," insisted instead of Reverend Diller, he said. "Why, that may not seem a proper way to engage in conversation, but on this journey I expect it is acceptable. I've always felt there are indeed times to make exceptions, so I'll agree," Frances said. But didn't you tell me your given name was Oscar?" He cleared his throat and examined the tops of his shoes, finally said, "Seth's my middle name, but it's the name I've always gone by." Frances smiled. "I'm sorry. I seem to keep embarrassing you. I shall call you Seth. My name is Frances Mary Kelly. You may call me Frances. How long have you been a preacher?" "Not long," he said. "Where'd you study?" "Study? Yes. What school of divinity?" He paused and smiled as if in reflection. "Yale." "It must have taken you years to study, yet you seem so young." Even in the dim moonlight she could see him blush. "I'm older than I look," he replied. Before Frances could say another word, he asked, "How about you? Are you 18? 19? "I'm 19, Frances answered. "Most girls praise you would be married by 19, Seth said softly. A rush of lonely feelings filled her heart, and Johnny's face came to her mind. She didn't answer. "I didn't mean to speak out of turn. I guess being a preacher all makes me seem nosy," he said, and his smile was broad and friendly. Frances smiled back. "Tell me about yourself," he said. "Where do you live? What do you do?" At first Frances spoke haltingly. "I'm a teacher. I teach school in Kansas," she said. But when she saw interest in Seth's eyes, she went on to tell him about our little house in the town of Maxville, built after the railroad came through. Seth asked about our family, and when she spoke of traveling with her brothers and sisters in the orphan train, he reached over and squeezed her hand in sympathy. Looking deeply into her eyes, he said, "I'm sorry you had such a hard childhood." His dark curly hair, his handsome face were so close to hers. Frances gulped and pulled her hand away. "It wasn't a bad childhood. There were many happy times and many good memories to think about." "Are you telling me there weren't bad times?" Seth asked. "Oh, of course there were," Frances answered. "But I try to keep those things out of my mind. I'd rather think about the good things that happened." "That means you're hiding from the bad memories." "No, I'm not," Frances insisted. "I just believe that there's reason to keep bringing up on. I see no reason to keep bringing up unhappy thoughts." "There is some for some people," he said. "Some of them need the anger and hurt to help them remember." Boldly, Frances asked, "Are you talking about others you know, or are you talking about yourself?" "Does it matter?" "Yes, it matters." Seth was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I fought in the war. You couldn't understand what it was like." "Help me understand. Tell me what's making you so unhappy." Maybe Seth could help her understand Johnny's bitterness. "Have you ever seen a Union Army prison camp?" Seth asked. "No, of course you haven't." Frances gasped. Seth didn't seem to notice. He continued, "Lice, rats, moldy food, what little there was to eat, not enough blankets to go around in the winter months, not enough clean water to drink during the hot summers, the hospitals, prisoners who were brought there in such bad shape they'd be expected to die." There's a long pause before he whispers, "I wouldn't die. I showed them all I refused to give up." "I'm sorry you had to go through such misery," Frances said, now understanding why he had wakened with such frightening state. What horrible nightmares he must have. Did Johnny have nightmares like that? Seth had been in a Union prison and Johnny in a Confederate prison, but their complaints were the same, and their hatred at being captors was equally strong. Frances sucked in her breath. What had she said to Johnny? The same held true for Seth. "Wouldn't you rather forget the unhappiness and get rid of the anger and the hurt?" she asked. Can't you put the past aside and think about the future instead? No matter, it's over now, Seth said. I'm going home to Missouri. To your parents? Francis asked. No, my parents died when I was away. I've made plans to join my older brothers. A strange look came into his eyes and he turned his head. Do they farm? Startled, Seth looked at Francis. Farm? Your brothers, are you going to be a visiting preacher, riding from town to town on Sundays and farming during the week? Is that what you plan to do after you join your brothers? He sat back. Have you seen some of the Missouri farms that were burned out? Crops and livestock stolen, everything gone? The land can be reclaimed, Francis said. Houses can be rebuilt. Suddenly shedding his dark mood, Seth seemed to relax. Let's talk about you. Are you going to be a teacher all your life? Or could it be you've got your heart set on being a farm wife, rising before dawn to feed the chickens and hogs? Francis felt her face grow warm. I haven't given my future much thought. Maybe you should, he said. Maybe there's a far different future out there for you. A much more exciting one. Seth, Francis said, it's getting late. We both need our sleep. Seth smiled, then sleep well. I'll see you in the morning. He rose and silently strode down the aisle. Seth and Johnny, Francis said, the same bitterness, the same hatred of those who hurt them, the same inability to let go of the past and move forward. If there had been no war, what would Seth have been like? Would he have been laughing easily, planned for a joyful future, hoped to be a good husband and father like Johnny, like the Johnny I once knew? Francis tucked her journal away in her seat and folded her jacket to use as a pillow. She rested her head against the jacket and closed her eyes. There was so much to think about, so much to do. A cry brought her to her feet, and she struggled down the aisle to where Lizzie and Mary Beth sat. The younger girl was upset, upright, fists clenched against her eyes, tears running down her cheeks. Mama! Lizzie sobbed. Francis scooped her up and murmured against the softness of the baby-fine curls and carried her back to her seat. With her arms wrapped around the baby, who snuggled contentedly against her, Francis fell asleep. She dreamed of Johnny. In her dream, he was on a train, traveling farther and farther away from her. She held out her arms and cried out for him to come back, but Seth stopped between them. Seth stepped between them, and Johnny didn't return.